Chris Druce.
Hello.
You have come from Knight Frank.
I have.
And we are really excited to have you because we can talk about all the things we love to talk about.
Thank you. You'll have to forgive me. I've got a little aid memoir there.
How much is our house worth? And how much will it be worth next week? Tell us the state of the London market at the moment.
State of the
family homes, not small apartments.
State of the London market. Well, just to give you a bit of an idea, we deal mostly, not exclusively, in the prime market. Very active in central London and also in the country market. So we divide our business into London and into what we call country, but effectively that's our UK business. It won't have escaped you. I think when we all closed the economy last March, we really didn't know what was coming next. And of course, the housing market was reopened on the 13th of May. And after an initial bit of hesitation, we've seen the most phenomenal activity. In answer to the London market, we saw a very strong surge in what has been described as the sort of escape to the country type market. And London itself, certainly in the prime markets, and you have to remember, of course, in central London, it's a very good beneficiary for international buyers as well, of course, which couldn't get over here. London went into a bit of a holding pattern, I think it's fair to say. Initially, prices contracted a little bit, and then actually, activity's been good in London, but prices have held. But to give you an example of this mismatch, I mean, last year in our financial year, our country sales were up about 30%, which was a record. We've never done more business. London was up 9%, so it didn't go away. It was still there in terms of in sales, but the pricing in London has been quite flat. And in a circular answer to your question, in PCL, as we call it, Prime Central London, prices have just moved into growth cycle, which is for the first time in 5 years. So they've actually declined since the EU referendum and the subsequent sort of political uncertainty around that. And obviously there's been changes in terms of stamp duty and, higher value properties have borne more of that burden, I suppose. So it's symbolic. It was only very small, but Prime Central London has followed kind of the suburban London, prime outer London, and is back in growth. And we actually expect it to be entering into an upswing and a kind of really strong kind of macro cycle over the next few years, essentially.
So I think if you're thinking about schools and thinking about what to do with your property, you're motivated by two things. And the first is obviously, I suspect, for our demographic, as it were, with young children and thinking about education, the move is, unless you're staying in London, the move is only one way, which is London to country. It is not country to London.
Possibly, although because it's a useful soundbite, we've all heard about this escape to the country. Yeah. What is probably truer to say it's really been the search for space and for greenery. And that has actually been the real driver that we have seen as a business over this period. And of course, there's plenty of that in the country. And lots of people, I think, in the same way the stamp duty is a catalyst to get people to act and bring things forward, maybe have decided, I was going to say goodbye to London in a few years when we raised a family, but actually I'm going to, Guildford looks attractive or something like that at this moment. So it has been about space, and what I was going to say is we have therefore seen, I came through it on the train earlier, for example, areas like Wimbledon have seen very strong price growth. And if you look at areas like Wimbledon, Richmond, Belsize Park, they're all areas that offer, if you are in prime central London, a little bit more space and a little bit more greenery for your money. So
that is interesting because people don't really talk about the outer suburbs. They do a binary London country.
Yeah. Well, and quite often it's a good halfway step.
Yeah.
So we see people move there, or we don't want to move a bit further, but maybe your next move then is to North Surrey, where you're still within striking distance. You go up to Cobham or Esher or somewhere like that. And also, but I mean, on the flip, yes, we have seen people definitely embrace the lifestyle change. The southwest region has been a very strong performer, both nationally and also for us. So the lifestyle element has come into it, but there are steps you can take. And
so you sort of contrasted there Surrey and the southwest. I mean, the southwest is proper. You're definitely out of London.
we saw a very strong.
But are there sort of towns of like Sevenoaks? We just had there.
Sevenoaks is a very strong performing area.
So those
for
kind
us
of
as well,
towns just
actually.
outside London.
I think the big benefit, what we saw initially when lockdown happened was a lot of the searches went very far out. We had a lot of people going, let's move down to Devon.
Let's
Great, let's do that. I don't have to work in the office anymore or any of this. And as I said, the Southwest has done really well and it's performed really well. But I think a lot of that initial enthusiasm then became tempered by a bit of realism. And generally, we have seen that the south of England has probably overall been the beneficiary. But people were then looking more, you use that example, Sevenoaks, but Tunbridge Wells. The southeast has benefited very well because it does offer people, they're not a mere miles away from, for example, London and amenities, but also you get the space and the extra room. So it was interesting. The southwest has definitely appealed to some people that want the complete lifestyle change. But around the southeast, North Surrey, home counties, of course, have benefited really well. What I would just add that we are seeing, and we're going to continue to see for certain professions with potentially work from home, is we are seeing the more traditional commuter belt redrawn. So whereas it would always have been, I need to be an hour, maybe an hour and a half max, within striking distance of London, or if I'm elsewhere in the country, Birmingham, wherever you're travelling into, we've definitely seen people now incorporating the fact that maybe they won't be commuting daily into the fact that, well, actually, if I live a little bit further afield or somewhere that hasn't been the traditional commuter spot, my money will go a lot further.
Well, that's interesting. On the basis that they'll come into London twice a week,
Yeah.
they can put up with a 2-hour train journey.
Absolutely.
They might even stay overnight in London.
We recently did a little bit of research around hybrid commuting, and it was on that basis that it was, well, actually, if you're only commuting once or twice a week, you may be willing to have what I would call a long commute, 3.5 hours. But by doing that, for example, you could live on the outskirts of the Cotswolds with all that beauty around you, sort of thing. So we scaled it for regular commuters, but it just shows you that there are options and pockets.
Because you've done a sentiment survey, haven't you?
We are currently, I was hoping to have the results today. We are currently doing a sentiment survey. I had a little sneak at it earlier. And interestingly, we thought this might have unwound a little bit by now, but there is still a very strong interest from respondents to consider living in the country or in more rural locations. I think the other thing that's coming out of it is space will remain a key driver. I don't think, whether or not we're all going to live in the country or not, I don't think we are. But I think irrespective of living in a city or living in the country, it's endemic now that people are looking for more space, and I think they are willing, with mortgage rates low, of course, and the other situation, to put more money into their homes because they value them. We were all locked up in them for so long. I think a lot of people have taken stock about whether it works for them and what's important to them. And also for some professions, if you might be working from home, you might want a little bit more breathing space as well.
So just one quick question before my final question, but I just want to just check, is it media hype when I open the newspaper and it says, the house goes on the market in Dorset, and unless you're a cash buyer and you've been to see the house in the first 5 minutes, you're not going to get it?
Well, the thing I can say is we looked at some on-the-market data, which is one of the portals which we feed into, and there are approximately, I'm going to get this straight in my head now, I think since the beginning of this year, there is approximately a quarter fewer listings on the market. Just available stock, partly because it's selling through. But the other side of this has been, obviously we have all read about price growth, which we have at the moment, pretty strong price growth. But the other element of this is if you looked at, in England and Wales, the time a house typically is listed on the market has fallen to 17 days.
From?
If you looked this time last year, when we were in the first rush, it would have been about 36 days.
Wow, so it's halved.
And it was high, and it was higher around January and February because the market slowed a bit because we were in another lockdown. It would have been higher. So there is some. I think there is some truth in that. Don't believe everything you read, of course, but
final question for the 17 days you now have to buy a house. Where would you buy in London, and where would you buy in the country?
We have. It's all about relative affordability. I would tip what we're calling West 2, which is Queensway, Bayswater and Paddington. It is neighboured by Marylebone. You've got Notting Hill on one side. It is considerably, prices there are considerably cheaper. As much as 30% below Notting Hill, about 70% below nearby Kensington and Chelsea based on the average sale price. And there is massive development going in there. Westminster is putting a lot of money into redeveloping Queensway itself. There is a huge project around the old Whiteley shopping centre that will be a big mixed-use development. And of course that area actually has more frontage, essentially, on Hyde Park. Than the other areas I've mentioned, which of course is what we're all looking for now. So that would be my tip. And the other
That's
thing,
a great tip,
and it's on it's on Crossrail.
That's worth the price of admission alone.
So the other thing is anything on Crossrail is looking very good. So to that point, Park Royal, if you're going further out, and Hanwell in Ealing, they're on the Elizabeth line, as it will be known, and we're seeing a lot of interest around there. In the country, slightly left field, is one of the strongest areas we saw was performers was East England, so East Anglia and those sorts of areas in Suffolk. And it performed very strongly in our own index last year. And part of the reason is typically it gets overlooked a bit because people quite rightly think, oh, Norfolk, Suffolk, beautiful parts of the countryside or the villages around it, but not necessarily that well connected. It's a bit of a struggle to get to the train station. When you are there, you're into Liverpool Street. It's a good connection. So that has performed very strongly, but it is an area for those reasons that has come back into vogue because it now actually offers lots of space, very affordable. But if you compared it to a popular one such as the South West, like Bristol or Exeter, house prices are lower and they have grown much slower than those areas. So if you want a slice of idyllic rural life, I would recommend East Anglia too.
Well, we saved the best till last. I told you it was worth staying for house prices, and we've got 17 days to capitalise on your investment.
Get on all.
Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Pleasure.